oolong, not too long. We're going to Taiwan, then saying so long, because this is our final installment of the semi-oxidized tea known as oolong. Today, we're going to study the fourth and final category of oolongs, which do not come from mainland China at all. They actually come from the island nation of Taiwan, AKA the Republic of China, right across the water from Fujian in southeastern China. And so the Taiwanese oolongs, I'm gonna go ahead and dive right in here with our first one. Let's just take a visual scan of our first specimen. This is a variety called Yulan Xin Pinzhong, which means Magnolia New Variety. And as you can see, the Taiwanese oolongs have this rolled characteristic that we remember from the Anxi oolong episode, the other three oolongs being Anxi oolongs, Phoenix oolongs, Wuyi oolongs. We covered all those. Of those three, the ones that these resemble are the Anxi oolongs, like Guanyin and golden turtle. And so you have these very nice, tightly wrapped, and you can see that these are a low oxidation because of their green color. And we're gonna start with this low oxidation variety today. These rolled low oxidation oolongs have kind of become associated with Taiwan, especially famous ones like Dongding, Alishan. These are all named after the mountains where they come from. And they often, almost, very often, not exclusively, but often are produced in this style that has kind of become associated with high mountain oolongs in Taiwan called Gaoshan cha. And so they're low oxidation, they're rolled into little nuggets, and they expand pretty impressively when you heat them with hot water. I'm gonna go ahead and get this going. And today I'm using my mutton fat jade teaware, which is my like thing lately. I've been really, really into it. This stuff here. This is from Dehua, and I find it to be really nice for these rolled oolongs because it's just very open, spacious, gives lots of room to expand, and it's just so sweet and lovely and nice of clay. I love using it. And I've got, and actually this Guanyin teapot here is also from Dehua, and they're very famous for their porcelain. And so this tea set I'm using, mutton fat jade, is unglazed porcelain. It's very nice and translucent. And why do I like porcelain for oolongs? I'm not sure why, but it's definitely the best kind of teaware to use for the low oxidation oolongs, I find. Some people use chA, purple sand clay, for those low oxidation oolongs, but I get the best results from having very fine porcelain like this. And so I'm gonna go ahead and give it a rinse, and you can see, I'm just gonna do one more of these for Guanyin here. You can see the green color of the liquor. This one out. And then I'm gonna go ahead and let you see the leaves in here as they unfurl. Got a little bit of liquor still in there, letting it sit. And the leaves are gonna keep expanding as we do this tea again and again. So these low oxidation oolongs have really took the tea world by storm kind of in the 90s. And I guess when we want to talk about Taiwanese oolongs and their legacy, because they're the ones who really popularized this. Now you see this on the mainland, but it was the Taiwanese who were really pioneering the production of these rolled low oxidation oolongs. And to talk about the story of tea in Taiwan, we kind of have to figure out, how did Taiwan get tea in the first place? Well, like most stuff in the tea world, nobody knows for sure. It's kind of shrouded in mystery in the mists of time. But I did some research on it, because I'm not really a Taiwan specialist, to be honest. That's why this is the last of the oolong episodes that we're doing, because I've been to Taiwan twice. I love it. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. And I'd love to spend more time there, but I spent most of my tea traveling time in mainland China. So this first one was a gift. This is not one of the teas that I sourced. This was a gift. This is number 2028 is what they call it in English, Yulan Xin Pinzhong, Magnolia New Variety. And the company that makes this tea company, they're based in Taiwan, and on their website they say that this is the Jason Bourne of Taiwanese oolongs for some obscure political controversy around it that prevented it from being released. They didn't go into detail. It's more mysterious that way. So super glad to have this. This was a gift from my friend Eliana. Thank you, Eliana, so much for this lovely tea. And so how did tea get to Taiwan in the first place? Taiwan's pretty far away from the presumed radiation point of the tea plant, which is Yunnan in southwestern China. This is all the way on the other side from west to east of mainland China. And so how did it get there? Well, the most recent and well-documented wave of oolong genetics to go into Taiwan from China comes from the mid-19th century when they brought over a variety from the Wuyi Mountains, which is where oolong was invented. The process for making oolong was developed there, called Qingxin, green heart. And that's still a very popular oolong variety, and it forms the ancestry for a lot of different Taiwanese oolong varieties, is Qingxin green heart. And so that's one source of oolong, of genetics for oolong. But then before that, there are records going back more than 200 years in Taiwan of tea being sold and produced. And that suggests that tea was already there. And what the lore says is that those oolong plants were definitely brought over from Fujian. There's some controversy as to where in Fujian they were from. Probably, my guess would be Anxi, because it's right across the water. Like literally you can take a ferry from Anxi to Taiwan, well, from Xiamen to Taiwan, which is right by Anxi. And that's, again, our tieguanyans, our golden turtles, zhangping shuixians, things like that. And also because the similarity of I'm gonna go ahead and put this in this gongdabe here. The similarity of the processing style does suggest a connection with Anxi because it is so much like tieguanyin or golden turtle or root mountain or hairy crab or one of those. There we go. So we don't have time to drink all these teas, so we're gonna just kind of put them in these gongdabes and let them chill a little bit. And while we're on the topic, the gongdabe, this guy and this guy here, this is a Taiwanese invention. The Taiwanese were the first to use the gongdabe as a reserve cup for gongfu tea service. So they brought us that innovation. Thank you for that, Taiwan. It's very, very useful. It means I don't have to wait for everyone to be finished drinking tea in order to make another steeping of tea. So that's great. I'm gonna put a little more water in this, and we're just gonna let it chill. Don't worry, it's gonna get drunk. We're definitely gonna drink this afterwards. So this is a Taiwanese invention right here, the gongdabe, and that really revolutionized the process of making tea because you can serve tea to more people, you can serve tea to people at their own pace where you don't have to wait for everyone to be finished, and you can also cool your water in it, and it also eliminates the need for circling the cups in order to get an even infusion on all of them. Now we can just homogenize the tea in the vessel, the gongdabe, and serve it from there. We've talked about that. We don't need to talk about it more. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this here and just get a view of this lovely pale green liquor. It's really beautiful, and you rarely will get such a green liquor on mainland Chinese oolongs. I'd say that like some duck shit, especially like winter harvested duck shit, you'll get something like that because the tieguanyans tend to be more green gold than this. You get some really green ones occasionally, but the Taiwanese teas are really, really green. And I'm gonna drink it now. Got definitely a lot of floral notes, almost like a soapy, not in like a soapy way, but the way that soap is floral scented, and you have this abundant, broad floral aroma. You get a little bit from these Taiwanese oolongs. Very nice, very, very nice. Almost like a marine quality to it, and just that very fresh, kind of grassy, kind of floral, almost like you're chopping the white parts of green onions, but just right by the roots. What does the thing say? The thing says almond butter, wild hay, maple sap. Maybe wild hay. I'll give them wild hay. Anyway, so that was very lovely. Super excited to be able to have this. I'm gonna stow this guy now here. And slide this guy over. There we go. Cool. So we have these successive waves of tea coming into Taiwan. So the most recent wave being the Qingxin varietal coming in from the Wuyi Mountains. Before then, probably from Anxi, we don't know exactly where, somewhere in Fujian, oolong genetics are coming into Taiwan as early as 200 years ago, maybe earlier. And then the Taiwanese also say they have their own wild tea. They call it shan chA. And a lot of people in Taiwan claim that this is their indigenous native wild tea that is there. And saying that tea could have made its way to Taiwan all the way from Yunnan sounds a little ridiculous. However, things that I've discovered in the past year or so have led me to believe that the natural distribution of the ancestral tea plants is much broader than we previously thought. I used to be under the impression that tea in China came primarily, if not exclusively, from Yunnan. That's where the oldest tea trees, they say, are. That's where a lot of the wild tea tree ancestors, such as Taliensis and Assamica, aka Yunnanensis, is probably more like Yunnanensis, just saying, and Crassicolumna, aka Yabao, are from originally. And so there's kind of this standard narrative that tea comes from Yunnan. Tea in China comes from Yunnan. It spreads from the west to the east. But however, in this last year, I have observed wild tea plants such as Crassicolumna in Sichuan province, not Yunnan, so further north than Yunnan. And also I've seen ancient tea trees in Guizhou that are more than a millennium old. And I'd previously thought that millennium plus tea plants were the exclusive domain of Yunnan. So it may be the case that wild tea extends much further east and north and in every other direction than we previously thought. At any rate, there are definitely waves of genetics coming into Taiwan that contribute to their very diverse gene pool of oolongs that they have there. And the Taiwanese are very, I would say, very official and scientific in their oolong breeding. They get numbers like 2028, and they're always creating these new breeds, trying to optimize for pest resistance and hardiness and flavor, et cetera, et cetera. There we go, Guanyin, freshening up here. And give me a rinse, and back to Guanyin. And also you might notice that I'm not using a cha pan today. I usually use my little stone cha pan. Today I am practicing a style called ganpao, means dry pouring, and this is very popular in Taiwan these days. It's actually a very old ancestral style of pouring tea because it was the original style that was used by people in Chaozhou. They did Chaozhou ganpao, where they would have a plate for their cups and a bowl for their teapot, and they would use the plate to catch the water as they poured in between the cups. And that was the original ganpao. Taiwanese ganpao is a little bit different. We're using a gong and we're using a shuifang over here to empty our water into. And so it works the same way as regular gong fu cha, except instead of spilling water everywhere, I just don't spill water at all. And they think it's very elegant and refined, and I actually have grown very fond of it in the past couple of years. It's become my default way of pouring tea. I actually don't use the cha pan as much as I used to. If it's at a party or I'm trying to like pour tea for a whole ton of people, then I'll do it. But you know, from day to day, I like to have my dry pour tray. This guy also is a ganpao tray that was designed for doing this style of tea service. So when you see a tray, it's obviously for tea. It doesn't drain in any way. Good chances are that it's a ganpao tai or a ganpao tray that's used for steeping this kind of tea. So moving on. I should have showed you all the tea. I'm gonna do that again here. Just gonna stick it on the thing. So what's next? We're gonna drink a GABA oolong. What is GABA? GABA is short for gamma-aminobutyric acid, and it's a neurotransmitter like serotonin or dopamine. It is one of the neurotransmitters, and it's a very important neurotransmitter. It's the main inhibitory neurotransmitter in the central nervous system, so it lowers agitation and maybe anxiety. And why is there GABA in tea? Why is there GABA in this tea? Are they sticking it in there? Are they adding it in? No, GABA is naturally present in tea, but in the oxidation of tea, in the processing of tea, it gets oxidized into glutamate, and the Japanese figured out how to preserve the GABA content of tea by processing it in the presence of nitrogen instead of oxygen. So you flush out the oxygen by pushing some nitrogen into the chamber, and then you do all the stuff that would normally be considered oxidizing the tea, except it's not oxidizing because there's no oxygen, just nitrogen. And the GABA is retained in its unoxidized state, and then you get the GABA when you drink it. GABA doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. there's no evidence that nutritional GABA that you ingest will cross the blood-brain barrier and end up in your central nervous system. So it may not be the case that supplementing your diet with GABA from things such as tea will actually affect the function of your brain with respect to GABA. However, there are some proposed metabolic benefits to GABA. For one thing, they seem to help with your insulin-based metabolism because they're produced by your beta cells in your pancreas, and they inhibit the alpha cells from producing glucagon, which is like the opposite of insulin. It liberates sugar, and so it raises your blood sugar, whereas insulin lowers your blood sugar. So that might be good for people with diabetes who want less circulating glucagon and more insulin. That's a thing. Then also it seems to be helpful in converting alpha cells that produce glucagon into beta cells that produce insulin, which could be good for diabetics also who are having trouble with their insulin. And it's also used to treat anxiety, ADHD, and PMS. So there you go. It's probably good for something. If you drink it, it maybe is good for you in some kind of way. It was very popular in Japan in the 1980s as a supplement for hypertension, for its purported blood pressure lowering effects. So there's that. And it kind of also the existence of this, why is this in Taiwan? Well, Taiwan was colonized by Japan for a good little while, and in the like late 19th, early 20th century, and the Taiwanese oolong industry during that time, during the Japanese occupation, became very closely linked to Japan, and a lot of Taiwanese tea was exported to Japan, and the Japanese are actually quite fond of the Taiwanese style of oolong with its low oxidation and bright floral character. So I believe that the majority of oolong consumed in Japan is Taiwanese oolong. I could be wrong on that. I do know that when I was in Japan, I drank a lot of tea from cans, and a lot of it was oolong, and it tasted like Taiwanese oolong. So, and you'll see in Alishan and some other regions in Taiwan that are famous for their high mountain oolong, you'll see export grade written on the bags in Chinese and also in Japanese, suggesting that they're destined for export to Japan, signifying that they're very high quality. So the existence of GABA oolong in Taiwan is probably has something to do with Taiwan's historical ties with Japan. All right, got the second little cup here. And then I'll go ahead. And you can see this is a much more heavily oxidized tea. That last one was 10 to 20% oxidation. This one's probably 40 to 60% oxidation. I'm just gonna give you that there. See him unfurling? Yeah. And correspondingly, we've got more fruity notes than floral notes in this one. We've got a little bit of that kind of dry grass hay character to it. And then when we taste it, you can taste the GABA. It presents as kind of a pumpkin-y sort of flavor. I've had GABA oolongs I don't like because they're too pumpkin-y. This one's good, I like this one. It also has like almost a little bit of a biscuity, cinnamony kind of note. It's nice, and a lot of that's also gonna have to do with the higher oxidation level. And maybe a little creamy coconut right at the end. It's nice. All right, so go ahead and take another Gong Da Bei. And in Taiwan, sometimes this will be referred to as a chA, TC. So that's just a fun little linguistic tip. If you're in Taiwan and you're asking for a Gong Da Bei and people are like, what? Try saying chA instead. That might make more sense to them. It's gonna be tricky. Slide these guys delicately, ever so delicately, into here. Yes. Then at the end, we'll get all these Gong Da Beis together. It's gonna look really neat. I'll just toss this kind of broken up leaves from the bottom of the can. This guy here, and top it off with a little bit of water, and there you go. So that's our medium oxidized oolong. I guess I've kind of ended up categorizing these by their oxidation level is what I've done. So I've got low oxidation, medium oxidation, and then we're gonna move on to our high oxidation Taiwanese oolong. And this is just a very brief journey into the world of Taiwanese oolongs. There's lots more going on. We'll cover some more of those in just a little bit. But our last and most highly oxidized Taiwanese oolong is gonna be the heavy roast dark oolong. And this is from Ming, Jian in Nantou County. So Ming, Jian is a township in Nantou County, which is kind of centrally-ish Taiwan. They refer to it as southeast because relative to the most of Taiwan's population, it's kind of in the southeast. But really, it's kind of right in the middle of Taiwan. And we talked in other episodes about how the more traditional kinds of oolong are going to be the heavily oxidized, heavily roasted kinds, and they produce those in Taiwan as well. Although they have been largely eclipsed by these low oxidation oolongs that are so flashy with their fancy taste and all the flowers and everything, there are still producers in Taiwan who are making traditional high oxidation, high roast oolongs. This one is probably 60+% oxidized and roasted. It smells like maybe an electric roast and a charcoal roast. And still, these tight little nuggets, tight rolled little nuggets. Yeah. Sometimes they call these types of oolong lao oolong, old oolong, because A, old people like drinking it, and B, it's kind of the old way of doing it. Okay. So, and with respect to the difference between Taiwanese and mainland Chinese tea culture, as we've discussed, ganpao, the very elegant practice of dry pouring, the Gong now universally used, including in mainland China. Not universally, they don't use them in Chaozhou all the time. Sometimes they do, a lot of people don't. They're kind of salty about them. But this very important, anyways, everyone can argue it's important to modern tea culture tool, the Gong aka chA. And let me give some of this out for rinse. And then also what I've noticed is that in Taiwan, there is, and among Taiwanese tea enthusiasts, and you people out in the internet world, feel free to correct me if you're Taiwanese and what I'm about to say is just patently false, please correct me. Because like I said, not as much, it's not West Taiwan Tea Company, you know what I'm saying? But my impression that I've gotten from my experiences with Taiwanese tea and Taiwanese tea lovers is that the emphasis tends to center on the fragrance and the flavor of the tea, whereas in mainland China, when you get really into it, people are more focused on the qi of the tea and the way that it tastes. And as a result, the quality of Taiwanese teas with respect to the flavor and the fragrance is exceptionally good. They're abundantly fragrant. There are a lot of people's favorite first teas, including mine. Taiwanese oolongs were the first type of tea that I really got excited about and got into. It was Dongding Oolong, back in the day when Dongding Oolongs were really good. Actually, this is kind of also a salient point. There has been a lot of environmental degradation in Taiwan, also in the mainland China, but it makes the news a lot in Taiwan that there's been some environmental degradation as a result of the overproduction of these teas. And some tea mountains have actually had their tea plants or part of their tea patches removed to make way for the native flora to grow back. Because you're getting these monocultured tea farms on these mountains that are terracing and denuding the mountainside and stripping away all of the natural vegetation, and then the moisture goes and the ecosystem goes. And so there is a movement in Taiwan now to take back some of these tea mountains from tea production and give them back to the native flora. So that's a thing. And I remember when I first started drinking tea back in 2003, Dongding Oolong was amazing. It was the thing that I wanted to drink all the time. Notice I'm doing a real long steep on this. That's because it's rolled and it's roasted. And I'm gonna treat it kind of like a roasted Taiwanese or something like that and give it like a nice long steep ready to wake up here. And got some darker color on that. There we go. But yeah, same. Alishan, one of the really famous tea mountains in China, in Taiwan, is also experiencing some pushback from environmentalists about the environmental consequences of growing tea there. So, also worth mentioning, trying to buy tea from people using traditional farming methods, organic farming methods, biodynamic farming methods, ecological farming methods. There's all kinds of different designations that are used, but people who are minimizing their impact on the environment and are making room for the native flora. And those are not only the most socially and environmentally responsible teas, they're also the best teas. The best teas are the ones that are caring for the environment as well. And let me go ahead and taste some of this one. Yes, very nice. So you get a little bit of that, like, is someone making popcorn? Somewhere far away? Did someone make popcorn here like 2 or 3 hours ago? Maybe. And you get a kind of a brassy, almost like rusty taste that gives way to like a round fruit flavor, almost like a peachy fruit flavor. I got water in here? I got water in here. I'm gonna do one more because I want this to steep longer before you see this exquisite color that it can produce. All right. And then just before we get too close to the end of this episode, I wanted to touch on the other Taiwanese oolongs. There's lots and lots of oolongs in Taiwan. They're not all rolled, they're not all low oxidation. That is kind of the characteristic style. There's also baozhong, which is kind of an oolong, kind of a green tea. It's not rolled like this. It's a very informal, loose kind of shape. And it's a little more oxidized than green tea. Not quite an oolong, but people call it an oolong. Anyways, again, as we've discussed, the categories are not the most important thing. What's important to know is that baozhong means the wrapped kind, and it's a reference to the old processing style, which involved wrapping the tea in paper, which apparently they don't do anymore in Taiwan. They're not producing traditional style baozhong that involves the paper wrapping anymore, or so says the internet. And I've never seen it there, but I haven't delved too deeply into baozhong in Taiwan. What I do know is that some of the kind of primitive ancestral styles or heirloom styles of green tea processing in Guizhou produce a tea remarkably similar to baozhong in flavor and profile, which it has that what they call the orchid fragrance, distinctive floral fragrance associated with the orchid. Also, if you remember back to the Anxi episode, we drank a tea called Zhangping Shuixian, which was a Shuixian, a water immortal, aka Narcissus breed, that is grown in Zhangping, right outside of Anxi County. And if you've seen the episode, you'll remember that it comes to us as a little pillow of leaves that is pressed into this little pillow shape and wrapped in paper. And there it oxidizes. And when I was in Fujian, the people from Zhangping told me when they were introducing this tea to me, they said, this is the ancestor of the Qing Oolong, the Qingshang Oolong, the light fragrance oolongs. We've been doing this for a long time. They come out sometimes, they do a dark one and a light one, but they say that the light oxidation one is the original light oxidation oolong, and the Taiwanese learned how to do it from us. Although it's the Taiwanese who popularized it, they learned the technique of doing it from us. Again, Taiwan and Fujian, you can see one from the other across the Strait of Taiwan on a clear day. You can see right across, and you can see China or Taiwan, depending on where you are. So they're not far from each other. And then Zhangping is right outside of Anxi, which is quite close. There we go. All right, not as dark as I was expecting. But it tastes dark. It's got some of that roasty carameliness to it. All right, and then, so yeah, there's a good chance that style originally, when they say the wrapped kind, they were originally producing something similar to that Zhangping Shuixian with that low oxidation style. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop these leaves in here. But yeah, Taiwanese oolongs, if you are just getting into tea, or if you want to get someone into tea and they're kind of like stubborn about it and they're not digging on pu'ers or green tea or anything like that, try some Taiwanese oolong. They are a great gateway tea. I mean, they're a wonderful category of tea in their own right. And some of the finest oolongs on earth are from Taiwan. But beyond that, they have a huge universal appeal because they are so incredibly fragrant and so smooth. The mouthfeel is so smooth. They don't have some of the astringency that you get from Phoenix oolongs. They don't have the bitterness that you get from Wuyu oolongs. They're just very, very agreeable and lovely and nice. And there we've got our three sisters, our three Taiwanese oolongs in cup form. And then I'm gonna go ahead and showcase them in here. Go. So we've got our low oxidation Yulan Xinpinzhong, aka 20208, aka the Jason Bourne of Taiwanese oolongs. Boom, right there. And then we've got our GABA oolong. That actually looks darker. Maybe it's the breed, I don't know. It's not supposed to be as oxidized as heavy roast dark. And then we have our heavy roast dark from Ming, Jian in Nantou County. Our three fancy oolongs. I'm gonna top them off to the same level and put these guys in front for a sec. There we go. Look at those big, beautiful leaves. That's one of the really nice hallmarks of Taiwanese oolongs. They've got a very high plucking standard and you get these nice whole leaves and whole leaf bud sets. Anyway, that wraps it up. We can now say so long to oolong for this season. And because that is, usually I think of there as only being the four categories of oolong, maybe main categories of oolong. If I discover some oolongs grown somewhere else, then we'll talk about them. But until then, this will be our final installment on oolongs by region. Oh, and just some notes, Formosa oolongs, if you hear someone talking about Formosa oolongs, they're talking about Taiwanese oolongs. That's the old Portuguese name for the island of Taiwan. It means beautiful because Taiwan is so beautiful. And when you hear Gaoshan cha, high mountain tea, Gaoshan Oolong cha, high mountain oolong tea, that's almost 100% of the time a reference to Taiwanese oolongs, often in this rolled low oxidation style. All right, thank you guys so much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you again on our next episode of Gong Fu Tea Cha.